So I meant to get this video up much sooner than now, so I apologize for that. What I want to do in maybe the next two installments, because this might be a bit of a long video lecture, I want to do something a bit different, right? And I want to read a lecture that I've written. So if it seems a bit stilted at times, or if it seems like I'm looking down a lot and not looking right at you all the time, I apologize. But I think this would be the best way to do it. So without talking too long, let me begin. I want to devote this video lecture to modeling how to work through a few difficult pages of the Grammatology. In my last lecture, video 5.1, I modeled how to weave together short, related passages in order to make sense of a tricky Derridian concept, the trace. Here, I will model how to move sentence by sentence, or sentence chunk by sentence chunk, through a crucial passage that concerns difference, difference, the trace, and the deconstruction of origination, as well as linear notions of time. And so we'll begin in just a few minutes on page 62. But first, a review. And a review you're probably sick of getting at this moment, but I think it's worth repeating. Speech, you will remember, is privileged throughout the history of philosophy, theology, and science because of its proximity to meaning, and thus to truth, intention, rationality, consistency, and God. According to medieval theology, for instance, it is through our words that we get closest to the word, right? So it is these words that are our, at least, linguistic mediator in terms of dealing with and negotiating with God. And that's in some sense why Christ is called the Word, because he is a mediator, St. Paul tells us. Speech is close to the ground and origin of meaning, what philosophy and theology have traditionally called logos, a word that survives in all of our ologies. Writing in these same texts is distant, other, deviant, different, and possibilizes, that is, makes possible, mistakes, errors, discrepancies, and misrepresentations and misunderstandings. It seems to encourage, writing that is, seems to encourage inconsistency, gaps, uncertainties, and absences where there should be fully present and intended meanings. We might think, for instance, of a text message, a text message from a friend, one that confuses us and leaves us wondering if we've misunderstood the tone, if he or she texted the wrong person, or if the autocorrect has made some sort of error. We will all recall the sort of viral links to various BuzzFeed articles that show us the top 25 most embarrassing autocorrect errors, right? A great Saussure passage, Ferdinand de Saussure, which Derrida cites on page 41 of the Grammatology, encapsulates this attitude to writing. Okay, you can turn there if you'd like, but I'm going to read it right now, and I might put it at the bottom in the comments, or in the description section. But the tyranny, this is Saussure, quote, "But the tyranny of writing goes even further. By imposing itself upon the masses, spelling influences and modifies language. This happens only in highly literary languages where written texts play an important role. Then visual images, meaning visual markings, phonetic writing, then visual images lead to wrong pronunciations. Such mistakes are really pathological." This is Saussure's word, really pathological. Spelling practices cause mistakes in the pronunciation of many French words. For instance, there were two spellings for the surname Lefebvre, from Latin Faber, one popular and simple, the other learned and etymological, Lefebvre and Lefebvre, because V and U were not kept apart in the old system of writing. Lefebvre was read as Lefebvre, with a B that has never really existed, and a U that was the result of ambiguity, so a U instead of a V. Now the latter form is actually pronounced. Okay, so that's Saussure. Derrida's main thesis regarding writing is that its operation as different, other, mutational, and misrepresentative, an operation as described by every major Western thinker from Plato to Saussure, also describes speech. Though it seems intuitive to associate speech with truth, meaning, proximity, and experience, Derrida wagers that if we really think about it, that a gap certainly also exists between speech and logos. All charges levied against writing always already apply to speech. It too produces misunderstandings. Gestures and tones often mix unhappily with the actual words uttered and or heard. We all, to some degree, stammer and stutter when really attempting to express what it is we mean about something of great significance to us. You might have noticed that in these video lectures, actually. But Derrida goes even further. Indeed, experience itself, our experience of the world, not communicated experience, not spoken or written experience, just experience, which is traditionally designated as, quote, and this is Derrida on page 60, the relationship with the presence, end quote. Experience, our experience of the world itself, also operates for Derrida, according to the logic typically ascribed to writing. Experience is writing. It too, experience, is primarily ruled by the operation of difference, deviance, and otherness, insofar as it marks a difference from the totality of the events, or the observations, or the perceptions, or sensations by which I record and imprint a mental record of my experience. In other words, Derrida argues that the binary of event and my experience of an event, or likewise the world and my experience of the world, follows the same logic, and I use that word carefully, as the binary thought and speech, as well as speech and writing. In each of these pairs, the world, my experience of the world, thought and speech, or logos and speech and writing, in each of these three pairs, the secondary terms, experience, speech, writing, introduces a difference, a gap, and an uncertainty into the primary term, world or event, thought, speech. To the structural operation of experience, language, speech, and writing in the narrow sense, Derrida gives the name arche-writing, or simply writing. This is the radicalized version of writing that Derrida wants to conceptualize throughout this book. Not writing in the narrow sense, but writing as an ontological structure, and one that is announcing itself, he claims, back in chapter 1, in contemporary fields like genetics, biology, cybernetics, and so on, that show that there is a kind of writing that precedes so many of the distinctions that we think of as secondary. Okay, that even, especially in the case of genetics and cybernetics, there is a writing that actually precedes any kind of distinction, even between life and non-life, or between human and animal. Okay, this is the writing. This is the writing that Derrida is attempting to conceptualize in this book. Thus, returning to my written document, thus Derrida takes Saussure's accusation against writing, an accusation he shares with the whole logo and ethnocentric history, much more literally than either Saussure or Socrates had taken it. He abstracts their accusations, radicalizes them into a larger, a more pervasive ontological operation that precedes all specific differences and oppositions. This concept of arca-writing is thus what he wants to call difference, right? So every time throughout the book where Derrida equates difference in writing or arca-writing and difference, this is why. Okay. It is, that is, arca-writing, or writing in the radical sense, or difference, right? These terms refer to the inescapable impossibility of presence and the imminent possibility that the traces of uncertainty and opposition and alterity within even the most self-evident term might announce themselves at any moment. Just as we saw in chapter 2, that writing, the exterior term to Saussure's linguistics, continues to announce itself in his work again and again and again. So now that's all supposed to lead us up to page 62, where I want us to begin. Let us read Derrida. The paragraph near the bottom of the page, skipping some of the introductory material there for the first few words, the first sentence begins, quote, "The phonic element," phonic, remember sound, the term, the plenitude that is called sensible because we hear it, right? We use our senses to hear it. The phonic element, the term, the plenitude that is called sensible, would not appear as such without the difference or opposition which gives them form. End quote. What does this mean? In short, what is often thought of as the natural fullness or presence of speech and its sounds that seem to make an ideal cycle between the mouth and the ear, an ideal activity of hearing oneself speak, what Derrida terms also terms auto-affection. It would not seem natural to us, this sensible cycle. It would not seem natural, it would not seem full to us without some sort of primary difference, otherness, or opposition, that guarantees not its fullness, but its partiality. Without a play of presence-absence within its purportedly secure borders, our sense of this auto-affection, right, as the most fully present way of making sense of meaning in the world, would not be possible to us. Just like writing in the narrow sense, is considered a form or representation of speech in Saussure's linguistics. Derrida is arguing that what we think of as speech is always already a form arbitrarily associated with worldly patterns and or forces. Scientifically, which is to say objectively, sound is merely the effect of a vibration of air, striking a recording surface, an eardrum, or a microphone, which is itself connected electrically or electronically to a processing unit, a brain, a tape, and a mixture of software and hardware. Speech, for Saussure, is not sound itself, but rather a set of sound images, a collection of ready-made and recognizable forms, given to otherwise unintelligible sensory perceptions, which are themselves distinct from material and worldly operations and events. What am I saying? What is Derrida saying in the sentence I just quoted on 62? Namely, that we would have no way to engage with or accumulate knowledge of the world as world. We would not be able to sense sensations and understand them as sensations. We would not be able to hear sounds and recognize them as meaningful speech without an irreducible difference between the world and the form of the world in our perceptions, sensations, and spoken or written expressions. It is that difference that I want to talk about today, that Derrida is remarking. That is between the world in itself, the world that would exist without any of us here, and the form of the world. The form of the world. By which and according to which we study and understand the world. Okay. And so Derrida asks us, sorry about the whistling, to hold three competing premises together in a difficult tension. The first premise, writing and difference as the impossibility of full presence. 2. Writing and difference as the imminent interruption and deconstruction of any self-evident presence, right? Anything that might appear to us or that we might think of as self-evidently present to us. That writing and difference also marks a sort of imminent possibility that at any moment, the fact that it isn't fully present to us is going to announce itself to us. That's number 2. And number 3, and I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit, writing and difference as the only possible origin of something that appears present. Right? So these are 3 different premises. So writing and difference as the impossibility of full presence, writing and difference as the imminent possibility, the imminent possibility that the announcement of that impossibility can come at any moment. And 3, that although presence is impossible because of writing and difference, things appear to us as present, or we apprehend them as fully present, only because difference and writing are the origin of that feeling. Okay. All right. So writing indifference as an impossibility of presence, writing indifference as a threat or menace that will sort of at any time trouble something that seems self-evidently present to us. For instance, the love the filial love, the relationship I have with my parents or something like that. Or the fact that I feel like I fully understand a particular poem or text, or that my political positions are transparent to me, fully present to me. So the second one is saying that at any moment, writing indifference will announce themselves in those structures of reference and will unsettle them in disconcerting ways. But the third one, this one is counterintuitive, that although writing indifference mark the impossibility of full presence, they are also the only forms according to which we can ever think that we can ever dupe ourselves into thinking that we're experiencing something fully present. Right? Okay, so impossibility, announcement of a sort of menacing and disconcerting interruption of something we think of as present, and the only possible origin that we have of something that we think of as fully present. Okay, Derrida wants us to hold these 3 things together simultaneously. Okay. I'm going to come back, so I'm going to pause there, come back, and we're going to continue reading on page 62.